Hey everybody, welcome to DnDTime Talks, a show where we chittle and chat about all things Dungeons and Daddle. Oh god, I can't believe I said that. Tonight we have a special guest. We're down one Pete, but we're up one MattyMorgs. Matty, how are you, my good friend?
I'm doing very well, and happy Halloween to you and all the other denizens of DnDTime. I'm very grateful to be back here.
Yeah, it's always good to have you, and of course, Matty, you're very well dressed up tonight.
Oh well, thank you. This was a part of my costume when I was handing out the candies to the kiddies that were coming by the house.
No one comes to my apartment. Last year, I was so disappointed. I bought like a ton of candy, expecting like I live in like a little gated apartment complex area, and I figured I know there were kids, but no one came. And then I just had all this candy, and then I felt really sick the next like 2 weeks as I was eating it all because my body can't handle that much candy anymore.
Yeah, I understand.
Hello there, chat. I see we got Xanderil, Bionic Shiba, and I'm sure there are plenty others hanging out lurking. Welcome everyone. Let me make sure the spectator's rolling for you guys. It is. Tonight we got a really cool topic. We're going to be talking about locations and cultures, which I don't know about you, Matty. That's a very broad topic, so we're gonna probably bounce all over the place with this.
That's fine. I am prepared to sling out geography, geology, culture, history. I got it all.
All right. Well, I'm pretty stoked, and of course, chat. We lurk, we attack, we eat candy as snack. Xanderil, absolutely. And while you're lurking and attacking, feel free to, let us know what you guys think as well in the chat. We're going to be watching that like a hawk and, keeping the conversation rolling. So I guess the first thing, right, is why are we talking about this? And I think the easy answer is it's super important, right? If you're running your own game of Dungeons and Dragons or any tabletop role playing game, thinking about like cool places and cool cultures is a big part of making the game feel like more what's the word? More organic, I think.
Very much so.
So, Maddie, is that something like when you're, I don't know how, actually, it's a question for you, right? How often do you run in your homebrew settings versus like established kind of settings?
Besides some times that in my store we've run content that was contained in a special packet. I've personally been running a continuous homebrew setting for the past 12, 13 years now. And
the same setting too.
The decisions from one campaign carry over into the next, and you want to talk about building a culture.
That'll build a freaking culture. Oh damn. That's really important. That's really cool. And of course, I assume that's one of the big things you think about, right? When players want to explore or go to different places, it's who are the people like in those areas? What is the culture like?
Yeah. Oh, because that can build worlds for you just by simply introducing one idea or one topic.
Yeah, exactly. This is something that I think is super important. If you're a dungeon master, thinking about the cultures of your world can really help to build that immersion, get that suspension of disbelief kind of flowing. And yeah, it's just a cool way to make things more unique and just make every city and place feel like its own real world rather than just kind of cookie cutter. God, the number of times I've been to cookie cutter medieval city. Oh boy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about a lot of different stuff with this. So I guess let's talk about kind of, I think probably the easier one first. Let's like talk a little bit about locations. They're kind of like tied together by default, locations and culture. But what are some like cool what are kind of things that you think about when you want to make a new location in your world, Matty?
Well, I'll tell you, in our workshops that we run, whenever we make a map, we make sure that there are at least 3 different interesting terrain features. And I'm not just talking about a mountain, a lake. That's natural geography. In the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's an entire list of interesting things that a settlement can have.
Yeah.
Statues, obelisks, monuments, and whatnot. And so, when we're building a location, and especially in my homebrew, when I'm trying to present something, I want there to be a psychological anchor for my players, so that they say, okay, so yes, it is, it's medieval city in an open grassland, but this is the place that has the thing. And so in our
Exactly.
maps, it's usually two different features. In fact, I kind of kid about this when we do our workshops, but I say, okay, come on, class, break out your dungeon masters guides, as we're going to be moving to page, and I'll find it here in a second. Here we go. Um, on page 108, if you open up your DMG's class, you'll see that there's a list of monuments. And so when we're making maps, we randomly generate two monuments, and then
Mhm.
our third interesting feature for the region that we're mapping. And a region could be a city, it could be even as small as a town, or it could be just that. It could be something the size of a state that we would know it here in the U.S. And then if you go to page 109, you'll see there's a list of randomly generated weird locales,
Mhm.
and then we drop those in and we say, okay, these exist. What are we going to do with them? What kind of people would live in an area that has X, Y, and then this really weird Z? And
Yeah.
and what would grow and develop? What kind of architecture? What kind of culture would be built up around this? And then, of course, on the following pages, there's random tables for the settlements known for one thing or another, and you all can see that on 112.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff because I mean it's really interesting. The same reason that Dungeon Master might give an NPC a special like voice, right? Maybe you have the dwarf and he talks kind of like this, but it's a little scraggly and a little dry in the throat.
Hmm.
And players identify and recognize, oh, it's that dwarf who does the thing. Maybe he's the blacksmith, or maybe you know him for some other important story reason. They identify it by the voice. Players identify places oftentimes by their key kind of monument, right? Their big thing that makes them stand out. And culture can play a very very similar role just in terms of how people uh,
Yes.
dress or how the city's laid out. We'll talk more about that a little bit when we gotta inevitably wander down that tangent. But let's talk about a few of these kind of weird locales, these monuments rather. Um,
Sure.
so I mean, I very rarely actually look at this table anymore. Usually, I just kind of pull things out of my crazy distorted mind. But I love a couple of these in particular, and one that really chimes out to me is number three: faces carved into a mountainside or a cliff. I love the idea of that. I mean, obviously, people can think of like Mount Rushmore, right, as like a classic American one, but there's some more like folklore style ones. I know, Maddie, you're from up in Michigan. I want to say I'm
Ohio.
totally wrong. Ohio, son of a bitch. Whatever. Have
Hey,
you
in
ever
our
been to New
culture, them's
Hampshire?
fighting words.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The cold places are all cold to me, like
Yeah.
Canada.
What?
Yep. You ever been to New Hampshire?
No, unfortunately, I have not. But I think I know where you're going with the
Yeah.
old man.
Old man on the
Although,
mountain. He fell
although,
down though.
yeah, he fell down. The old man fell down and isn't doing so well.
he's, he's fallen. He can't get back up.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of something like that because everyone's gonna recognize. Oh yeah, it's that place where that forest settlement. Where looking out over the trees toward the mountains, you can see the kind of face carved into the side of it. And first, that's really cool, even if it's just a rough kind of idea, like the old piano in the mountain. But it's also neat because it adds a new storytelling element. Like, well, why is that there? What is it? Is it just a natural thing? Is there more mystique? And I love how kind of one thing leads to another. And I feel like a lot of
Yep.
these go down that angle, right? Go down that direction. Um, like another great example here is a great stone wall intact with tower fortifications, right?
Yep.
Spaced at 1 mile. That's so cool, right? That establishes a huge facet of the city or civilization or settlement or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, a great effort went into building it. Why?
Yeah.
Is it to keep people out, or is it to keep people in? Why are
Yep.
the guard towers a mile apart? Or if you want to take it literally, or if you just say, well, we understand there's guard towers, it's every half mile, or is it a relay system of some kind where
Yeah.
maybe the town exists in a very foggy marsh, and so the walls are actually really a raised road, and you need great sources of light and at these guard towers, and you need eyes looking out to again keep things out or to keep things in.
I mean, I wasn't even thinking about it like that, but I mean, you just mentioned a great example of it, like a very practical skill and use thing. I was seeing it almost as like this vestige of some ancient empire, right? And how the civilization that is now grown up around this wall, right? How does it live now that it has this wall? Maybe on the outside of the wall, like you were saying, in the marshy area, that's where the more peasant folk live of the area,
Yeah.
or of the settlement, and maybe the more wealthy people live on the inside of the wall, or maybe it's something else. I don't know.
Yeah, you
Um,
could look at it. Well, look at the Berlin Wall as it existed.
mm,
It was a political boundary,
yeah,
and even more ancient. If you look at Hadrian's Wall in England, that was built, during the Roman occupation, and that set the limit to. All right, so you have the Scottish barbarians to the north, but everything to the south is this, modern for the time, this modern Roman, Anglo-Saxon settlement that's growing up here, and Hadrian's Wall was the limit.
yeah. I love that kind of stuff because it's now giving us this great context where we can start to develop a culture from this monument. This kind of, I guess we're gonna say, location, right? A location can be like a big thing, like the country of Nationville, right?
Yeah.
Or it can be as small as a obelisk,
Yep.
a sandstone obelisk that rises in the center of town. And I love that those things can all kind of tie in together. So let's talk a little bit about how maybe we pick one of these, right? And we kind of work through a little bit about how we would come up with uh Maddie, I see people in the chat are liking your hat and mask. I think
I actually
rather
have a little
dapper
bit
hat and
more that I
mask.
can put on as our
Oh,
discussion
really?
continues.
Oh, dang. Well, moving forward, I think we should start to maybe start to, as an example, build out a couple of cool ideas that we think might make sense for, let's say, a culture that grew up alongside this wall, right? This huge wall. Um, so as a first thing, I mean, how high are we saying this Great Stone Wall is? I mean, we're gonna say it's probably pretty damn big, right?
Um, well, it can be, but think of this too.
Hmm.
You've seen Shawshank Redemption, haven't you?
I actually haven't. I know it's.
Oh my! Am I gonna
I
have to cancel this
know.
interview? I
I'm
mean,
a crying shame.
all right. Well, speaking of the very quaint, New England, sea border here. You go out to a lot of these farm fields, or heck, have you played Diablo 2?
I haven't done that either. Go ahead with the farm fields, though. I'm very familiar with farm fields. Sorry,
See,
Maddie.
we're
I'm
having a
leaving you with
cultural
nothing to work
conflict.
with.
I want to describe a message to you, and I want to invoke it, but in your culture, you haven't been
Well,
exposed to these elements. Okay, so anyway, in farm fields, you'll have a lot of walls that have been
oh
built
yeah.
up with stone, and it's maybe what, like 2 3 feet high at most. It might keep some small animals in, but really, it's more just a pen-in property. And those stones came from plowing the fields
Hmm.
because obviously the stones aren't going to allow the plants to grow. And so what's the farmer going to do? Well, you have property, and so you stack them up. And so a wall of this kind can be, it was made by a great agricultural society, and really it's just it might only be 3 or 4 feet tall, and everyone calls it whatever, the Great Wall of Farmville or something. But honestly, anyone who just kind of goes whoop, can just cross over that border. But everyone out of kind of respect and out of fun, that you have this whole village of farmers who just threw all their stones in a pile until it kind of made a line. Everyone just regards it. Yeah, it's the Great Wall, and it isn't really great, or it could be just that. I mean, we could be talking, the Great Northern Wall in Game of Thrones. That is, that
That's
is
a great
also
wall.
like Hadrian's Wall. That is keeping the barbarians of the north out from the civilized lands of the south. And of course, there's a whole metaphor between the Starks and Lannisters being the Lancasters and the Yorks. So anyway, I'm sorry, I got on a bit of a tangent.
No, it's all good. I mean, that's what we're all about here. I love I love the idea of like a somewhat larger wall. Cause like, I mean, I'm just thinking of like the kind of culture that would grow up around that. I think there's a lot of like I think people are very nimble there. I think there's probably maybe messengers are a big deal. Um because someone needs to climb up and down those walls. No one wants to do that all the time. And so
Yep.
maybe there are people, maybe there's like a group of people like the messenger service there who can just scale the wall. That's what they do. They're like wall scaling parkour, messenger guys. And it's cool, but really they're just delivering the mail,
Well,
It's
and
like,
if you want to build it into culture, I mean, it could very well be those people are good at climbing, or
hmm,
they've developed a culture around it where they say, you know what, there's a bunch of people that they're too lazy to climb, or maybe because it's a racial thing. I mean, look at the Aarakocra, look at the Tabaxi, where they would live. A Tabaxi wall is going to be different than an Aarakocra, than a human, than an
absolutely.
orc,
Eric
for
Coker
various
Wall?
reasons.
Interesting.
Um, So it's and by the way, having slighted me here with my culture, I'm gearing up for war here.
Oh no.
Um, so I mean, it's coming, but that's fine.
Jeez,
Uh,
Maddie, do you make those or?
partially, these were custom made
Oh
at my
wow.
behest with my design and requirements. Though I don't have enough ranks in leather working myself to be able to do that aspect. So
Those are
this
pretty
is a custom
baller.
piece.
Wow. Well, I super dig that. And of course, I think with these kind of cultures built up around like a wall, for example, you got your climbers that maybe are kind of iconic. I think that it's just a really cool image, right, of the players walking through the big gate to the wall, and that's what they see. They see little tiny things set up all along the top of the wall where maybe people live. People probably live up on the wall. It's probably safe up there, and you got people jumping up and down. You probably have things kind of hanging off of it, kind of trailing. It'd be cool if there was just like a lot of wind, and maybe that's how people just kind of dry their clothes. They tie them to like ropes and just let them,
Yeah.
trail off in the wind off the top of the wall.
And that is a big signifier culturally
Mhm.
about is this a culture that built the wall to be to exclude themselves from the world? Is it because of war, or is it because of practicality? Even though a wall may seem impractical, they're using it for daily life stuff instead of military, and that changes the entire tone. We
Oh
can
yeah,
have the exact same 100-foot high wall, but if people are hanging laundry from one and people are patrolling the top of it with spears in the other, the it's a
very
big
different
difference
feel.
despite the exact same everything else.
Absolutely, and it also like I think it's another really cool thing to kind of consider with that, right? Is so let's go in the context that maybe it's they're hanging the laundry, right? It's a more peaceable kingdom. Well, did they build the wall because originally it wasn't a peaceable kingdom, right? Is this a place that has in recent history been wrought by war, or maybe even distant history if it's a real old wall, right? These kind of questions can help to I think can help to fuel what this place is like and what the culture
Yes.
of the place is. Um let's jump on to the next kind of talking point, because I think we're getting really into the nitty gritty. But one of the things that I like to kind of think about, right, when developing these more nuanced cultures, I guess you could call them, is what really makes the culture unique. So, I mean, everyone's been to generic fantasy land, and not every place has like a huge monument. Obviously, if you're going to like a metropolitan city, right? Let's say you're going to Waterdeep. Actually,
Okay.
that's a bad example, right? Because Waterdeep does have big monuments that kind of set it apart and give it some unique. Um, Same with Neverwinter nowadays with the big chasm. But God, really bad example on my part right there. Actually, because I'm thinking like all the Forgotten Realms, big cities, and I'm thinking like, well, Baldur's Gate has the huge arch over the chasm. Um, Even Luskin has the host tower of the Arcane. So I guess if we're talking about Forgotten Realms, they all have big iconic things to them. But maybe we can go a little subtler than that, right? Because a lot of players, I've found that if everything has some big thing, if the big things don't become as special anymore.
Yeah.
So like I like to think about like more subtle things too as well. Like even if it's just how the architecture of the city is, right? Maybe I know one of the things that I like, especially if in a more like desert-y region, and it kind of makes sense a little bit. But I like having the you have an excellent kind of look right there. But I love the idea that like all of the buildings are kind of built as one. The city's built as like one huge city almost. Lots of arches, everything interconnected.
Oh, so kind of like maybe Sharn from Eberron, if you're familiar.
Eberron is something I've never actually played. God, I can't believe it. I've never played an Eberron. I'm probably thinking of Sharn, but I've never played an Eberron. See, this is where it's like I'm talking about culture, yet I'm so uncultured, guys. I was thinking a little bit smaller than Sharn, not quite as spiry, but I mean it's a very similar feel. Um, God, that feels kind of like Ravnica. I'm looking at just kind of like a couple pictures right now of what.
Hey,
Of
well, we're gonna get a good
Sharn.
dose of culture with Ravnica here this month.
Yeah, really. It's weird. I'm so torn about Ravnica. Are you stoked or how do you
Um,
feel?
I'm open-minded. I guess cautious optimism. We'll see
Okay.
how it goes.
See, my worry, and obviously this has not been the case, especially in this fourth quarter of 2018, where it's like, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, next book. Yeah, I'm sorry, Dungeons of the Mad Mage and Ravnica. We're just gonna put out 3 books. My fear is that like
Yep.
the Magic the Gathering stuff will slowly begin to overtake the regular D&D content. But
Yeah.
I think that's a bit of a slippery slope fear. I shouldn't be so worried about that, especially with the end of this. Jeez. Now, Maddie, how much earlier, being like a game store, I'm just going totally on a tangent now. How much earlier did you know about the multi books thing at the end for the third quarter than everyone else?
It's
Or they kind of spring it on you guys too?
it we're really at a point where as soon as any information gets out, whether it's leaked,
Uh-huh.
it's known, and so I can't say, haha, yes, I
I
fooled you all.
knew.
I've been sitting on this egg for a month before revealing it. Um,
Uh-huh.
really the only time where I might be able to get some advanced information is if I truly do have access to a leak, or sometimes they might at a convention, sort of like the weekend before the Monday or Tuesday, they'd actually put something out. You would get some information on a presentation because they're like, "What are you going to do? You're going to talk about something we're going to provide more information and solid dates on anyway on the next day or two."
Yeah, I gotcha. Maddie, is your arm glowing?
Oh yeah, it
Oh
is.
damn. That's baller. Oh,
In fact,
radical.
if I was really looking to detect some magic here, um,
Oh
there's
wow. It has a lot of colors. Holy
UV
damn.
lights. So all I have to do is swing my UV gauntlet over something, and it'll tell me if it's magic or not.
Oh shit. Is your webcam magic?
Well, it looks like it's picking it up.
Cool. I mean, that makes sense. It's magically putting your image on the screen for everyone. Also, hello, Diadems. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, we got Maddie here tonight. It's a good time. So anyway, let's maybe we talk about a few other kind of environment, like kind of standard. I know it's weird we're talking about making specific cultures. I'm getting trying to get back on track because I totally derailed that. And hello, Face of Jericho. Um, but let's try to talk about a couple of kind of iconic um maybe biomes, right? And maybe how
Sure.
some cultures might develop unique to those. Because I think that's a thing that like a lot of people assume that they have an idea and have a grasp on, and then they make the assumption the players get it too. Um, when that doesn't really help to make it too unique. So like maybe we talk about like the North, right? Cold, frigid.
Mhm.
Um, maybe it's not always cold and frigid, but the winters are very harsh and cold. Um, and I like the idea of thinking, well, what culturally could have developed in this region that would make it a little more unique than some other places? So, I mean, a really easy, obvious one is snowshoes, right? You
Yeah.
mentioned that they use snowshoes, and that's a cool, just a little note to make things different or special. Another one that I've seen used before, I think actually I think I might have done this the first time I saw it. I don't remember. I'm definitely not the first one to think about it. Um, is the idea that in this kind of cold, inhospitable place, fire, right, is kind of the thing of life, right? It's
Mhm.
how they don't die. And so maybe every building or every home always keeps a burning torch, no matter what, as a cool way of the fire will never be lost in the town. And it,
And
it makes go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was saying it just makes a cool like image, right? Of in the darkness, the player is kind of exploring, getting close. They're lost in a blizzard, and they just see as they crest over the hill, looking down into the valley, fire. Just fire, little fires everywhere, and it's just all the torches.
And
Just a cool like image.
what you're hinting at is actually a derivative of a
Here we
practice
go.
that currently goes on in our world.
Uh
Can you
huh.
guess what that is?
Um. I'm sure I could on a better day, but today I cannot. Maddie, enlighten.
So, we're speaking of cold northern climates. We come to let's we're talking in a fantasy world, and let's derive it from the things we know here in ours. And our world has cool northern climates. We have um, I mean, here in North America, there's Canada and such, but let's go to the old world, and
Mm,
uh, we have very cold, wintry places that for for old ancient people who didn't quite understand the science behind what the difference is between a deciduous tree and a an evergreen,
hmm
they would see that some plants never die in the winter. They're always green. So clearly, these plants maybe they're magical, maybe they're blessed by some sort of a being. And so when you make ornamentation out of these evergreens, it's inviting these elements of life. It's inviting these elements of luck and of prosperity. That you can survive through the winter, much as these evergreens are. And then
Absolutely.
you have this old culture that also says, you know what? In the winter, I mean, we may not have advanced algebra, calculus, or astrophysics, but we definitely know the days are shorter. And so,
Mm.
what we want to have happen is we want to encourage the sun to come back, because that's when we grow our crops. That's when we run and play, and that's even when we go to war. We don't war during the winter, and so therefore we don't conquer new territory. And so, to encourage the sun to come back, we all light torches. We all get together as a community, and we light up our homes, because then on the winter solstice, which is approximately around December 25th, we have lit our homes. We have decorated our homes with evergreens in order to invite life and prosperity into them.
I love how like it ties back to just such an iconic kind of tradition. Obviously, for those who have not understood Matty Morgs' thinly veiled Christmas reference, uh, we're talking about Christmas or the winter solstice or any of the various other holidays that all happen to occur while conveniently on the same exact approximate time of the year. I love that. I think that's a really great tie back, and yeah, that is definitely a probably the origin point of what I was originally getting at is that kind of vibe. But yeah, I
And
love that thing about cool like holidays, right? That makes sense for them regionally as well.
this discussion can very much stem or splice into the D&D time talk you had about holidays, because
Yeah.
holidays are intrinsically cultural.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you'll have so we're describing more druidic pagan practices in barbarian old Germany, and in Scandinavia and such. Meanwhile, down in Rome, which is closer to the equator, they don't have such pageantry. They also don't necessarily have they may not have the same vegetation, or they may not know or really care that evergreens don't drop their needles like deciduous trees do, because they just don't get access to that. And so instead, you get a culture in Rome that developed the Feast of Fools, or Saturnalia, right? Saturn,
Mm.
which is no, which is a reversal where suddenly, because in that culture, it was common to own slaves. And I'm not trying to bring up touchy subjects. We're keeping
Oh,
it
of
in the
course.
vein of culture. This is historical context and whatnot. But on this day, on this, on the shortest day, on this feast, um, the house slave became the master of the house, and the master of the house then had to wash his feet, had to bring him food. And this was the Feast of Fools, where the fools got to run the town for a day. And it was merrymaking, it was enjoyment, it was festive. And you know what? For that one day a year, peace was brought to the world in this own Roman fashion, because the downtrodden on that day were uplifted to a position of privilege. If only to then, go through the other 364 days. Um, and so again, that's an extension of the culture. We have these Germanic barbarians that didn't necessarily have a slave culture or an underclass like that. Instead, they were very much tied, right? With winter, we're talking survival. You live
Yeah.
close to the land. You are an extension. That's why we have druids as we do in D&D. And yet down here, when we have maybe a more developed or a civilized society that's in a lot warmer climate, where you don't really have harsh winters at all. I mean, if you saw snow, then I mean the gods must be. It'd be like getting snow in Texas. You get like an eighth
Yeah.
of an inch, and suddenly schools shut down. Meanwhile, up here in Ohio, we're like, what?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
cultural, even though we
Oh,
live
it's
in
a
the same
Monday.
country. Um,
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I know that feeling. I mean, it'd be like, I mean, it's like when it rains out here in Los Angeles. The world is everyone freaks out. It's like the world is ending because it's actually raining. It blows my mind coming from the Northeast where it rains all the time. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's just totally, and it's really interesting, right? Because for me, I'm shocked that people actually like feel and understand and behave this way. And I love the idea of making sure your NPCs in these areas also kind of share that shock, right? So, I mean, a great example could be if we're sticking to that icy frozen north kind of vibe.
hmm
Um, and we're talking about all right, fire and torches, right? By by affiliation are sacred, and these evergreen trees are sacred. I love the kind of idea of maybe an NPC from that area getting like angry at the players for doing something that they just don't even understand they've done wrong. It's like, oh, they're trying to sneak into the cave. They're hunting some monster alongside some of the people up there, maybe like a yeti or something, and they say, "Oh, we'll douse the torch." And so we can sneak up on it.
hmm
And the NPCs get pissed, and they're like, "What happened? What?" And it's this great moment where this kind of culture kind of clashes, and the NPCs are upset because you've just offended them beyond belief. You've outed a torch.
yeah.
You've
You've
destroyed this
invited
thing.
darkness and cold and
Yeah,
death.
exactly. And the players are like, "What are you doing? This Yeti's down the cave. Why are you yelling at us?" I love that kind of vibe. Or maybe I mean, the same thing could go for like cutting down one of those trees, an evergreen tree,
Oh yeah.
or hunt, or just killing an animal and then not actually use it, like just leaving it. Right? You get ambushed by yetis in the night, and you just leave the bodies, and the NPCs, they give you that stink eye, like you're just leaving that fur and meat out there to just freeze and go bad.
Yeah.
How dare you?
And that creates, without necessarily even needing a villain, that
Oh yeah.
creates a friction inside of a campaign, or it creates maybe some animosity, or it creates the an antagonist, not necessarily the villain of a story, because you have your group of well-meaning adventurers that comes in and
Yep.
we'll use another real life example. During World War II, when the Americans were attacking Japan proper, or either they're traipsing through and we're approaching V-Day and such. Well, here in the U.S., we don't tend to take our shoes off in our
Oh
houses.
yeah.
And so
Yep.
to Japanese families, it was bad enough that already, all of the devastation of the war, and this is a culture, by the way, that tries to save face as a method of expression. And and so if a family, would see these American troops, who they may not have even been trying to insult them, but they come in wearing muddy army boots. Who knows? You could have stepped in well, we have a Shiba here in chat, Bionic Shiba. Maybe Bionic Shiba still has to poop, and you could have stepped in dog poop and just tracked it into this house where the Japanese culture is very fastidious in its appearance, in keeping things orderly and clean and neat. And so, one of the biggest travesties that could draw a tear to someone's eye is to see a pair of, like an American soldier with wearing these dirty boots inside of your family's, your grandpa's old house. Because that violates, your culture and everything you grew up around. Meanwhile, the American was just like, hey, I'm here. We're actually here to celebrate peace. I want to share. I want to share a candy bar with you or something. And meanwhile, it was just a flagrant violation of that culture.
Yep.
And so this can translate back into D&D and other storytelling, where they've created enemies-ish question mark simply by not paying attention or not following the local custom.
And I love that, right? I love the specific example of here, let me share my food, right? Let me give you this candy bar. I want to be friends. We don't want to be enemies, kind of thing. Trying to be believing that you know best, right? Because a lot of players think they know, like they're trying to be good. Oh no, I'm the good guy. These are the NPCs. I'm going to show them I'm such a good person. And a lot of players and people, for that matter, forget about NPCs or PCs or characters and players, people don't stop to think, what do you want? What do you think is
Mm-hmm.
best when they try and do something for someone? Because I love the idea of going back again to the, I'm keep jumping back to the frigid kind of tundra thing, but the players kind of, they show up in the town, and maybe there's like a language barrier so they can't communicate super easily, but things go more or less all right. And then in the night, one of the maybe the town is like attacked, right? And one of the guards is taken away by like a yeti. And the next day the players decide to go kill the yeti. And they go and they kill the yeti in the cave. And when they come back, the town is like, you killed the yeti. Why did you do that? Yeah, it kills
Yeah.
someone every once in a while, but it keeps the deer from getting out of control and eating all the food so we don't starve. Right?
Or here's something else. What if the village was sacrificing their own?
Yeah.
It could be a classic, sacrifice a virgin, sacrifice a baby. Kind of again, we can go back to Game of Thrones
Firstborn
with
son,
the
whatever.
sacrifice of the babies to the White Walkers, or it could even be, as we've heard from Eskimo or Inuit legend, where the elder tribe would be put out on an iceberg and sent out to sea, so they're no longer a drag on the rest of the community, and they did so willingly. And so
Yep.
now you have, a group of, noble, bright adventurers traipsing in here, and they see, grandpa or grandma. I mean, well, we'll keep it cultural to D&D time. So there's an old man that's being taken out to a clearing, and he seems happy with it. Everyone's like, "Hey, goodbye," and then the party's like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And
Like, oh, we're
they
gonna kill
watch
him.
as the old man is savaged by a yeti, and they're like, "What? This is this a cult? What horrible people live here?" And meanwhile, if they ran in and tried to save that grandpa, the village would be upset and the grandpa would be upset, right? Like,
Yep.
I was supposed to die there. My death was supposed to save the village for another year and
Oh,
feed the Yeti tribe, and it causes a big kerfluffle.
a great kind of overused one, I think, a lot of time with orcs and orc tribes, but really this could be any sort of warlike culture, right? Is, do you heal the injured on the battlefield or do you let them die? Do you let them
Ooh,
die as warriors, right? Because I mean, before even experiencing or running into the culture, right? The players are wandering through the remains of like a recent battlefield. There are dead all over the place, and they find a dying blank. It could be a human, it could be an orc, it could be just any sort of barbarian race or whatever. Hell, maybe the race has nothing to do with it. It's just a tribe of eclectic barbarians. Whatever. But
Klingons even.
yeah, it could be freaking Klingons, right? And they're like, oh my god, this person's still alive. As they're like, well, we're player characters, we're gonna loot, and they heal that character, and you've just destroyed their sense of being
Oh
because
yeah,
it's like I was supposed to die here. And what does a person think when they think, when they know I was supposed to die? It's like, have the gods forsaken me? Have X, Y, and Z, right? Have you just created a villain by saving him?
yeah.
Uh, and yeah, it's a really interesting, like a lot of different things you can tie in with that kind of stuff. That I think a lot of dungeon masters don't really think too much about, but really you can look at all of these tropes throughout film. In, like, for example, Klingons, die a warrior's death, cool. Or you can look at I say film, but TV,
Yeah.
media, everything. Um, and of course actual history. Like, I mean, Maddie, your history is top notch. Well done. But all these great historical references, specifically the Inuit elders being, going out on the iceberg. That's a brutal one. But it's also like very valid. You know, I'm gonna be honest. I couldn't help but just think like, man, I don't think I know a party that would how they would react to that, right? Like, I think every single party reacts to that totally differently. Experiencing something like the elder of a tribe just being sent out on an iceberg to die,
Yeah.
and they're just like, "Oh God, what do we do?" And I mean, there's one correct answer: it's nothing. But because
That's
you can't re-educate a group of people, and even if you could, that's not how their society works. It's different from the trappings of the society players are familiar with.
and in storytelling, look at I mean, let's go from fantasy to sci-fi
Mm.
into what many people would be considering a very like an almost near perfect society in Star Trek, right? There's not really
Yeah.
a scarcity economy. Morality is, people are whatever. What we seem to be beyond, a lot of our human foibles of racism and segregation and all that. And yet, what is the primary thing that we fight against, or that we see fought against in Star Trek? And that is the violation of the Prime Directive, which is don't interfere with other
Yep.
cultures. Even though you have the technology, even though in almost the exact same other circumstance, but this one, you would intervene because it was welcome. In this case, you can't, and
Yep.
that's a big that's a big deal. Now, in fact, if you don't mind me even kind of using this as a springboard
Oh,
in Star
please.
Trek back to D&D and culture.
Star
Um,
Trek, I'm familiar with. Oh, I'm sorry. The Next Generation, I'm very familiar with.
okay.
The rest of
Um,
Star Trek, I'm like, okay, not that great though.
then Jeremy, Shaka, when the walls fell.
Ah, man, I cannot remember the exact phrase.
Shaka, when the walls fell.
Yeah, I can't remember it.
Uh,
At
Darmak and Jalad
at
at
Tanagra.
Tanagra.
Yep. God, that
If
was a
you
good.
remember that episode, you want
Yep.
to talk about a culture. Uh, and where I'm going to bring it back to D&D is, in Star Trek they have the universal translator. And you know what? You have that in so much that you have comprehend languages,
Mm.
and uh, you also have tongues. And make sure here we'll go back to D&D school as my cat blocks me on camera here. We'll go back to D&D school, and I want you all to open up your players' handbooks to page 224 on comprehend language. And I want you to notice in the very first sentence, for the
Literal.
duration, you understand the literal
Yep.
meaning of a spoken language. There are many languages that if you take them literally, if you take a literal translation, it is going to be Shaka when the walls fell, and you are going to respond with an appropriate phrase. That is the literal translation. You don't get the nuance with these spells. You get, the word sun is, Ingabunga. And so when they talk about the sun, you hear Ingabunga and that's sun, but you don't get what the sun is to these people. If we're talking about Ingabunga to this northern tribe, we're talking about the sun. This is a great ball of life and light and warmth and fire. This is everything that is meaningful. It could be father. It could be so many things, but all you understand is Ingabunga means sun. Oh, hey, all right,
He was all up in my feet.
all right. So this is now DnDTime talks with cats, which is also a culture.
Cats are in fact a culture.
Um,
He's just gonna hang out up there.
so I want you DMs out there to remember, if you have players that are using comp language or are using even that invocation that warlocks get, Eyes of the Runekeeper, I think.
Yep.
Or even I think tongues might even have something along those lines too. I'll double check on that. Remember, you are getting the literal meaning of what you're being told by these foreign people that you don't understand, and that can make for some very interesting contact where you understand but you don't understand what they're saying. You're speaking, or at least you're understanding the same language, but you're not communicating through the same language.
Exactly. You know the words, but you don't know the meaning of those words.
Exactly.
So many players, I see them like, I guess comprehend languages, and they just assume that they perfectly know it. Another great example is like Thieves' Cant, right? Thieves' Cant is a little less interesting than this one, but what a player might say in Thieves' Cant is like, "Oh yeah, saw me mum last week. She's doing swell." That might mean something totally different in Thieves' Cant, right? The meaning of that phrase might have a very different, maybe even more sinister approach.
Yeah, that could be a mark of death on someone.
Yeah, right. That could mean the boss has work for you, and it's good and is happy with your last performance, right? That's all it might mean. Or it might mean something totally different. But it's the kind of thing that you can comprehend language all you want. All you're going to hear is, "My mom's doing great."
Yeah.
Which, what is that? Okay. Or talking in reference to these historical events in allegory for the Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. That's a much deeper context for it. But I love that kind of stuff. It gives things a lot more. Man, your cat is so much better at being a camera cat. Data, what are you doing? There's a camera here for people who want.
Yeah. He's just a big old slug. He's a furry slug.
My boy just likes to be up really high where he can see everything.
Ah.
Speaking of that, cat culture. So no, I kid.
Well, look at the internet and ancient Egypt. They're tied because they both like cats, and we all speak in hieroglyphics.
And for the most part, we don't like rats, except for the internet, which kind of likes rats because they're kind of cute. But not all rats. Not when they eat your grain. That's another great thing, right? Animals in Egypt loved cat. People loved cats.
Yeah.
Why? Cats eat rats. Why is that a good thing? Rats spread disease and, more importantly, eat their grain. A really cool way of like thinking about that next kind of step, right? You have a bunch of players or a bunch of characters. No, places. God damn. Say we have a place that relies entirely on fruit. Hell, maybe bees are a sacred thing there. Or rather, more than that, what hunts bees? Birds? Do birds eat bees? What the hell eats bees? Data, what eats bees? You eat bees, or you would eat bees if I let you. But you know, we look at what eats bees, and maybe those things are considered like evil, right? Or they're on their kind of All Hallows Eve, right? Their spirit holiday of where you kind of scare away the darkness before the cold starts, before the cold season starts. That's maybe something they celebrate.
Yeah.
Is chasing away the birds or something like that. And maybe you have a bunch of people in bird costumes and kids chase them around with big sticks and just chase them around
And
town.
and in that case, when you talk about the birds and the bees, you're talking about like war stories. You're talking about like conflict and
I'm sorry, I got caught up. Excellent comment in the chat. Bees on steroids eat other bees. Oh dang. Whoo. Man, your cat's so good at this. But yeah, I love thinking about that kind of like, all right, well, we want them to have some kind of iconic religious thing or faith. Well, why do they feel that way? And I mean, in the Forgotten Realms, maybe it's Shantaea, right? Shantaea, goddess of bounty and harvest. But then they have this thing about bees, and it's like, well, why do they have this thing about bees? Well, because bees pollinate the flowers, and that's why life. Boom. Yeah, maybe they call their warriors the wasps, right? Or
yeah,
something like that. They have cool, or maybe cool. Maybe it's a little weird, bee related kind of verbiage.
yeah.
Um, yeah, all right. May you suffer the death of 1,000 stings, and a great phrase to be uttered to your enemies in such a place. Um,
Well, as Cohere or Cohere said, swings around a hornet's nest, ha. I mean, think about this: if you live in an area that's very temperate for bees or wasps, if your culture isn't afraid of them, you've either developed the bravery, technology, or a combination of the two. What if,
mm,
in going to war, they would actually just have, they would cultivate wasp nests in these special boxes, and then
oh, that'd be
anytime they're
intense.
attacked, they just throw this box into the ranks of the enemy. And a wasp's nest. You could wear full plate armor all you want, but if a wasp gets in your armor,
Oh,
you might freak out.
oh yeah.
And
Oh no,
that's
you're
even
gonna
before
freak
we might
out.
know that allergies exist in this world.
Yeah.
What are you going to do if suddenly, wasp nests are hurled, onto the battlefield?
Oh, I love that even better with like the aggressive conquering army. They're from the empire of evil, right? The very rigid, lawful, kind of probably lawful evil, kind of imperial empire marching
Yeah.
with their legions of plate armored people, and then the townsfolk are just throwing wasp nests at them, and like it's working. I love that idea. I think that's uh, a really cool vibe. And I think that's a way that, like, especially like later in a campaign, if you've established this settlement, right, you can give them a little more flair later on and be like, yeah, they are the wasp net people. I just think that's rad. Or even on a smaller scale, you don't need armies even. Maybe they just keep wasp nests cultivated by the guard towers in case like trolls show up,
Yeah.
right? You might not be able to kill the troll. We're just a bunch of dudes. We're CR one quarter guards, but we will piss it off and make it run away. No one likes getting stung by wasps, and I'll
And
take a few stings to get rid of a troll.
and you know what? For creative role play, if you want to have cultures interact, look at it this way. Let's say that if there's trolls that are attacking, we go back to the guard towers and the wall of these otherwise peaceful people. and they're cultivating wasps, maybe they don't really, maybe they're maybe as afraid as the wasps, or they don't mind it as much. But maybe, just maybe, to the trolls, for some reason, wasps, or this particular breed of local wasps, actually suppress their regenerative abilities. And that to a troll, you want to talk about a way to instill fear. If just a simple sting, like an allergic reaction from a wasp or two, suppresses your evolutionary why you're an apex in the thing that you do. And so these people, as a warning to keep these trolls out, actually just, they're not even really warlike people. They just know for some reason the trolls don't like the wasps, and if they keep the wasps, the trolls go away. In Minecraft, you have a cat and it keeps the creepers away, and the creepers will just explode everything, but a simple cat will drive them off.
And I love that, because actually this super ties into even you think of halflings, right? Especially when you're in the context of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. They talk about the fish skippers as a great example. They skipped the fish, and the fish killed the troll that was attacking because it hit them so hard, and that was their story about how they got their name. Or maybe the halflings tell a tale about how the brave adventurers drove off the troll bearing their torches and pitchforks, and the halflings have no idea that trolls don't like fire, but they know, hey, if I get my torches and pitchforks and we all group up, we should be able to get the troll to leave.
Yep.
I love the idea that just someone at some point figured out, maybe completely by accident, that trolls don't like these wasps. You can come up with a great story about it, right? That maybe can be told in the town's tavern about how old lazy Bob saved the town by not cleaning the wasp nest out of his, wheelbarrow, right? I love that idea,
and now these people aren't generic fantasy town, farmers. Exactly. They're the wasp people, even though they're not wasps themselves. They have this. This is what's known about them, and it turns into their thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I can see right now, like, the players are walking into town. Maybe they're walking by the wooden palisade. It's not a great palisade here, around this small town. And just hanging from poles are these little tiny little strings, and just little, papery wasp nests all kind of curled up at the end. And the players are like, shit, there are wasp nests up there. And they're, real careful to walk under the gates. Like, all right, these people are weird. There are wasp nests on their gates. That kind of thing sticks with them. And later they find out, oh, there's a reason for it. Okay. But they remember, these are the guys who have their wasp nests hanging from gates, under their gates. It's intimidating, but in a really cool and iconic way.
Yeah.
Because no one, I mean, I won't say no one. I've had players that are great, take super diligent notes, remember the name of every NPC, every town, everything I say. And God bless you players who do that. You are the greatest. The fact that you remember the eye color of Big Toe, the halfling merchant, wow, you're a hero. But I don't remember that all the time. I don't know what Big Toe's eye color was, because that wasn't important to me when you asked that question.
I'd be more curious about his toes. And
they're big.
and that's something else too. If you want to weave culture into your campaign, names, family names, given names. The PHB does a good job of providing some default concepts for you to think about. How elves name themselves, and others. Naming can be a lot. Or if it's not even a representative of a culture, an individual, a named NPC, such as the one you invoked, or in a campaign of mine, there was a troll that was leading a gang in a city, and everyone called him Bullrick at the Right. And the reason why he was called Bullrick at the Right was in this, again, you don't have to explain this as a DM, but maybe this makes your players want to investigate, or they just learn along the way, and it adds so much depth to your world without you having to go tremendously out of your way. And so what happened with this troll, he was he's involved in criminal affairs, and so he ended up getting into a fight, and his left hand was chopped off, and he grabbed it, and as he was running it, he held it to his stump so it would regenerate, right? Because that's what trolls do. We were just talking about this,
Yeah.
and his hand regenerated upside down, so he has effectively two right
Oh,
hands
no.
because both his thumbs naturally point in the same direction. And so since then, especially because he thought it sounded intimidating, he was Bullrick at the right because he has two right hands effectively. And that just hear that character story, and now have you imagined an entire string of events in a culture then of criminality or punishment or something along those lines of jockeying and power position, and it all came from a simple name.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff, right? Because especially the multiple meanings that gives it, right? Because obviously he's the right-handed, but maybe there's even a deeper meaning, right? He's a criminal, right? Criminal gang boss or something. But maybe he's a criminal because of the oppressive nature of the city, right? And so in a way, he's right, to kind of fight against it. He's doing it in the wrong way. Maybe he kills people, he's a troll, probably not a good guy. But
It
uh
was yeah, he wasn't above murder. He had two ogres, one named Jin, one named Tonic, again for their own
excellent.
reasons. So he had Jin and Tonic were sort of his lieutenants, and then aside from that, he just sort of had the urchins on the street, and they were known as the Sticky Bandits. And the reason for that is they would have stick ups where they would take glue pots, throw them at the employees behind the cash registers to stick them to the floor and the counter, run in and steal the money, and then they would run out, and no one had to die. Although Bullricket and the Sticky Bandits here, it was like the double plural. It was really the Sticky Bandit says, like bandits with an es at the end,
Mm,
just because it was more intimidating. Like there's even more bandits. It's not just plural; it's like super plural.
it's super I dig it.
Um,
That's
and
very troll logic there. I love it.
and then that's how they got their reputations. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's the Sticky Bandits," uh, and of course, there's a wink and a nod to popular culture. Again, tying it into culture. Can
Mm.
you place it all where Sticky Bandits has a pop culture reference?
Oh god, I no.
Um, well, so Bionic Sheba, yeah, he hinted at something else. How about this? What if I said the Wet Bandits?
No.
Have you
You have to understand, I'm real bad at putting
have
one
you
plus one
seen
together.
have you seen Home Alone?
No, and that's even worse. There we go. I tell you, Maddie, I tell you. Oh no, don't kill me, not with your magic gauntlet.
Um, so anyway, in Home Alone, in the first movie, the hapless criminals called themselves the Wet Bandits because one of them
Uh-huh.
said, "I want to develop a reputation for us." And so every house that they would rob, they left the faucets on and stuffed the drain so it would flood. And
Oh.
in the second one, where they were in New York, he
Mhm.
said, "Well, we got to do something different." And so what he did was he wrapped his hand in double sided tape, and every time he would go past he'd go past like a Salvation Army like a bell ringer, he'd dip his hand real quick, like pretend like he's dropping change in, and he would like take a bunch of change stuck to his hand, and he's like, "Hey, we're the Sticky Bandits now." And so I took that idea and I said, well, in this culture that we're developing for this city, in this gang within the city, it's not only a fun pop culture reference for us as players, but it makes sense inside the game. And so again, you've created a psychological gateway with your players, if it's something your players understand, of course. Um, and they said, oh yeah, it's the Sticky Banditses, and um, suddenly we get Jin and Tonic, and we have Bullrick at the right, who are all the Sticky Bandits' gang, and it means something in the game, in the game, but it also means something to pop culture or for those of who understood it.
And I love that kind of stuff too, because when it's something that a player can really identify with on another level besides just in the game, it gives it a little more like oomph, right? It gives it a little more purpose and a little more identity. You don't have to worry about doing quite as much esoteric um, or rote description, right? You can go into more of the nuance for them, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, Bullrick at the right. You can go into it so far as he's got the two right hands, Whereas before, maybe, if they didn't have the context of the sticky bandits, it would have been harder for them to just go past the glue thing, right? Maybe they would have been caught up on that being the more iconic
Hmm.
aspect of it. I like that kind of stuff. It I don't know. It also also really like that in misleading players, and maybe that's the wrong thing to do, playing off their meta knowledge in a rough way, but or not in a rough way, but in a misleading way. I know, like having different kinds of trolls, maybe that don't have the same kind of vulnerabilities based
Yeah,
on their environment. I love doing that kind of stuff because it gives, well, first of all, makes the game a little more real. There's not
yeah,
just one troll in all of existence in the world. There's how many millions of breeds of butterflies in existence? There's
yeah,
more than one goddamn type of troll.
yeah,
So I love, especially players that maybe kind of can't help but get that little bit of metagamey in there. Because like it's a weird situation with that. I know I'm getting totally off topic here, but because I hate when players like try to not metagame, but it's just like, oh man, you're just intentionally not using fire to avoid metagaming, but you would absolutely use fire because it's your best spell and it's what you do. Have
yeah,
you ever seen that?
yeah. And
So,
we're still discussing culture even with this.
yeah,
We've
it's just
taken it from
player
an
culture.
in-game culture to the culture of the game or the culture of the players who play it, whether it's localized to your tabletop, to your local friendly game store culture, or to broad, the concept of what's a D&D player.
Yeah, I love swapping things up like that. I really love swapping up beholders, giving beholders totally different eye ray abilities,
Yeah.
because players just never get that. Or I think it's Xanathar's guide. No, it's not Xanathar's guide. It might be in
Volos.
Volo's guide. Yeah, it's Volo's guide to monsters. Has a bunch of cool alternative, not eye beams, but central eye abilities to go in place of the anti magic cone. I love those abilities because I think they're just really neat. I, I'm pretty certain it's in Volo's guide to monsters. I'm like, yeah, no, it definitely. And I love that kind of stuff because it really helps circumvent these kind of common thoughts. The worst thing for me is when we get into a fight with something that's supposed to be really dramatic, like a beholder, and the players say, "Oh, it's a beholder," and they just act
Yeah,
like they get
exactly.
it. It's not
It,
special.
it's a pool of hit points that
Yeah,
their aim is to. It's not a thing.
yeah, and it's the same thing with cultures. The worst thing I feel you can do it's is if the players come to this town they've been to a couple times. It's got maybe the one tavern that they go to that they know. They maybe know the barkeep's name, and they say, "Oh yeah, it's that tavern in the plains. That's or that seaside tavern." And it's just, oh man, there's so much unique about that I want it to be so cool. I hate when it kind of gets washed away. Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
Man, talking about culture, one of the things I really, we're not culture, but locations, back to that. Let's talk about taverns just really briefly before we close up. I know are you streaming later tonight, Maddie?
Yeah, I have as much time as you want. I'm here as a guest, and I'm happy to support you all.
Well, Maddie, thank you, of course, for being with us tonight. It's been a great conversation. He is unmasked and he is handsome, the face of Jericho. You're correct. He's the face of MattyMorgs. Uh, but what I was going to say, I love the kind of talking about a specific monument or thing that makes it stand out. I love taverns where they have a unique name, and that unique name ties to a thing, and that thing ties to a story, and that story ties to a character. So, like, Seaside Tavern, maybe it's called the Rusty Anchor, right? Or that's a really, really lame one. But right, so it's called the Rusty Anchor, and then inside the tavern they walk in and they're like, yeah, whatever. But then there's a gigantic old rusted anchor just in
Hmm.
the middle of the room, just standing up there, like 6 or 7 feet tall, huge steel anchor, and the players are like, what the hell? And they can see the floorboards are kind of cracked a little under it from just the wear of time of gravity pulling this anchor down. Or maybe they're like, depressed and like the wood is warping around the anchor,
Yeah.
right? And I love, and then they ask like, where the hell did you get that anchor? And it's like, oh, the anchor. That was from my old ship back in the decades past. It sank just off the coast, and I came in here, started building up the funds to head on back out and scavenge what I could. All we could find left of it was the anchor, and that tells. Now we've tied a great story to like
Yes.
name of a tavern, the anchor. No one's gonna forget that. Cool thing, giant rusty anchor covered in barnacles and cool. Tie it to this cool NPC, tie it to this cool story, and hell, maybe that ship has great treasure on it, and that's now a cool plot line. Players can go out in search of the ruin of whatever the ship's called, right? Which, in that point, you can call it whatever the hell you want.
And for the students out there in DnDTime, I want you to open your DMGs to page 113 because there's a tavern name generator. If you roll 2d20, it will give you a first part and a second part. So I don't know, Jeremy, if you have any d20s or an automatic roller next to you. If you want to roll 2d20 real quick.
Matty, I can absolutely do that.
Nerd.
Let's see. We got a natural 20.
Okay.
Great start. And an 18.
All right, 20 and 18.
Don't battle me with real dice, by the way. I'll kill you. I'm notorious for having really good real rolls. Please, Matty, hit me.
The Gleaming Dog.
The Gleaming Dog. Interesting.
Why is there a tavern named the Gleaming Dog?
I can think of a reason. I mean, right off the tip of my tongue, maybe there's a little dog that lives in the tavern that's known for pilfering people's pockets, just kind of intrinsically. It just kind of does that as like a thing passively, and the coins kind of gleam in the light, maybe as it's kind of running off with the bounty. I mean, that's just one pull out of my butt, but
and this is, by the way, where exercises like this in practicing critical thinking and thinking about culture and whatnot. So that's what came to your mind. What came to mine is it's almost like a spirit of a dog, whether it's a fae or it's actually just like the ghost of a dog. And perhaps this was a bar that was built atop or into a tree, not unlike the Inn of the Last Home in Dragonlance, right, in Solace. And this is like, it's just a local fae spirit that takes the form of a dog. And it's always been around. This tavern's been in the same family or even passed through several for the past 200 years. And the dog is always there. Everyone knows the dog. And the dog is innocuous, but everyone knows it. And the place is called the Gleaming Dog because that's what this place is. In fact, if you even want to have a lot of fun as a DM, you can say that the shingle outside is actually, it's called something else. It's called the Valenwood tree,
but
or
everyone calls it the Gleaming Dog.
But everyone calls it the Gleaming Dog, and it's so no one's ever changed the sign, but no one's ever contested that it's actually the Gleaming Dog. And
I love that.
And you go from there, and that points to the culture of the town, where everyone knows this as the Gleaming Dog, and everyone can tell you the story, and they give you directions to a place called the Valenwood tree. When you as an outsider are brought up, and you're like, but I'm looking for the Gleaming Dog, and then maybe this little spirit, it might be a dryad or some other thing, or a not so chaotic evil will-o-wisp or something, just sort of like bobs out and greets people, or something along those lines.
I love that too, because once again, you're taking that expectation that players have. Oh, the tavern's called the Gleaming Dog, and then they can't find the Gleaming Dog. All they can find is the Valenwood tree, right? This twist, this expectation, and kind of twisting it back, turning it back on them. That is something that players remember and players love because it keeps them engaged mentally, right? Especially for something as players can find it very mundane. All right, we've entered into the town. Let's go to the tavern. Let's take a short rest. Let's explore what's for sale. Let's find what quests are nearby. Let's leave and go adventuring some more, right? A very kind of what can feel monotonous and very rote to some players. Putting these little twists in there to make places feel unique and real. I love that. I love that a lot. And oh man, I'm just thinking more on your Gleaming Dog now, right? Because I imagine maybe the dog doesn't always appear. It's there like maybe like half the time. And I love the edit, like the barkeep just kind of talks to the dog even when no one else can see the dog. Like, can they really see the dog? I can't see the dog right now. What's going on? Is everyone here just crazy? Are they playing a joke on me? Right? But yeah, I love that kind of stuff. And now that I'm thinking about it with the anchor thing back for the tavern near the shore, I'd
Yeah,
probably call it like the name of the ship's anchor. So it'd be like if the ship was the Caratan, it'd be like Caratan's Anchor is the name of the tavern. And then, that ties into the wreck of the Caratan more. Or maybe
and
it's the name of the barkeep.
it prompts lore, and it prompts
Exactly.
exploration.
Well, and it's lore that's engaging. Whenever you have an NPC that just sits down, it's like, let me tell you my lore. The players don't want it. They don't want that most of the time. Some players love that, but not everyone does. Um, but having the players ask the questions and really be engaged and having story elements that prompt those questions, I think, that's what separates like your average dungeon master from someone who's really taken that next step and thought about all of this stuff. And the Face of Jericho, I'm glad you love this. I'm glad you're loving this kind of stuff, because I'm loving this kind of stuff.
Jericho, for 9 and 17, if you want a thought exercise for yourself, here, I'll give you homework class, or I guess specifically Jericho. 9 and 17 is the Slaughtered Satyr. The Slaughtered Satyr as your tavern name. What happened that made a place called the Slaughtered Satyr? And that's your homework to think about, Jericho.
I love that. And I see Bionic Sheba mentioned, but you can't outroll Lucker Pete. Dude, Lucker Pete's could be the name of a tavern.
Oh, that sounds like a great tavern name, yeah.
The name of a tavern from a halfling who was too lucky until like he was struck by lightning or something, right? That's I like it almost as an ironic kind of name. But I don't know. I think this is a really cool conversation. I'm really, really happy with where it went. I mean, I had like a ton of stuff written down to kind of guide this conversation, but to hell with that. This was great. Now I won't keep you up all night, Matty. I know you've got a stream later on. What are you talking about tonight?
Well, over the past couple of weeks, we've been having a lot of DM workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for this week, we're going to go back to a good old bread and butter style, what we've been doing. And that's over the course of the week. We go Wednesday through Saturday for our workshops, because we play on Saturday. And I did my best to try and do one-shots like what you and Pete do. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And hopefully, I mean, I'll give a shout out for my channel if you don't mind.
Please.
Give that VOD, or I'll put it up on YouTube later. Give it a look, and I'd appreciate your feedback if you all think that I did a good job running a horror one-shot for the players on my Tuesday game. But anyway, what we're going to be doing this week, nice bread and butter, 5 completely randomly generated characters that we're gonna give personality. We're gonna make a history. We're gonna make them compelling, all from random number generation. I think we're one of the few channels on Twitch that actually enjoys RNG, and we thrive off of it. And then at the end of the week, we're gonna make a campaign outline that will draw on some writing style, because we're gonna get in. November is NaNoWriMo, right? National Novel Writing Month. Then after a week is done of broadcasting on my Discord, I make all the characters and all the other stuff available for people to download. And if you ever are stuck for inspiration, you can download any of the campaign outlines and prompts or characters or anything that we make. So it'll be a nice, solid, we want to talk about storytelling. We want to talk about getting into it. That's what we're going to be doing. We're going to make 5 characters, probably a map. So actually, for any of you out there, if you want to see a session dedicated to what we're talking about, by having walls and by having tavern name generators and by having all this culture built up around random elements, who could exist within these sets of boundaries. That's what we're going to do this week.
That sounds awesome. I'm stoked. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to try and be there, but I know obviously Friday I'm kind of booked. But yeah, that sounds radical. All you guys, check that out. It's twitch.tv/MattyMorgs. I'm going to post that in the chat right now. Matty's awesome. I mean, you've just watched him for the last hour and 40 or hour and 20 minutes, give or take. So draw your own conclusions. But let's be real. Matty, you've been great. This is a really great conversation. I super love it. I'm really, oh my goodness, it is deleting my links.
Oh, I tried to put a link up
guys.
also for for Jericho, but if you pop over to my channel and type in !Discord, it'll produce a an invite to you, and make sure too that you know I'm happy to I'm happy to be friends with Pete and Jeremy here. You know, we run our different realms, our different workshops and such. So, you know, I want to make sure that I invite any of you who are here, who are friends of Pete and Jeremy, to come give us a try. And as much as if I have anyone from my community, so to speak, who are here, I want you all to give these guys a look too. Because they run some fantastic games. They're very creative and inspirational, and they're just a ton of fun to watch.
I have a super crazy game planned for this Friday. I'm super excited for it. It's gonna be funky. But of course, again, thank you, Matty. Thank you all of you guys for hanging out and for watching. Roger, I see you hanging out. I knew you were here, buddy. Face of Jericho, Bionic Sheba, and everyone else lurking in the chat. Thank you so much. We super appreciate you guys. We hope you've had a great time and have plenty more great time. Matty, I have no idea how on earth you have the energy to stream and be as crazy powerful as you are, but God bless you, bud.
Thank you.
You are a soldier. And yeah, I'll see you guys all later tonight on Matty's channel. Matty, when is that going to be? An hour-ish?
Yeah, it's 11 now. Probably around 11:30 is when I'll be live.
All right,
I'll put a bumper screen up for like 15 minutes beforehand, and then I'll probably go live at 11:30.
Radical. And if for some reason the links aren't working for you, I guess Twitch isn't letting me post in my own channel for some reason. Boy.
Are you subscribed to your own channel? Otherwise, you might have to go through ads to be able to interact with your own content.
I'm on my own. I'm on the DnDTime account, so I don't know what's going on. If those aren't working, we're going to be hosting MattyMorgs. So if you can't find them with the links and you don't want to type in that /MattyMorgs, just give it 15 minutes and it'll pop over to him once he starts. Matty, thank you for joining us one last time. Thank you for watching, everybody. And I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Matt.
And this is DnDTime.
This is DnDTime. Oh,
it's hard. It's really hard.
It's culture. This is the culture of the channel. All
Good
right,
night, everyone.
Be well.
See you later.